Welcome to SATV News. This is Riaz Mahmood with our headlines. So, ECNEC approves 22 projects worth Taka 46,419 crore. Dr. Yunus chaired the meeting. Vicious conspiracy underway to obstruct a transitional process, says Mirza Fakhrul. BNP leaves 4 seats open for Jamiat Ulama Islam. And the third headline is ICT orders trial of Hasina, 16 others for enforced disappearance, torture at a TFI cell. You had been listening to the headlines, now in details. The Executive Committee of the National Economic Council today approved a total of 22 development projects with a total estimated cost of Taka 46,419 crore, with the majority of the funding to come from the Government of Bangladesh portion. Of the total project cost, Taka 30,482 crore will be financed from the government exchequer, Taka 1,689 crore from project loans, and Taka 14,247 crore from the concerned organization's own funds. The approval came at an ECNEC meeting held at the NEC conference room in the city's Sheribangla Nagar area, with Chief Advisor and ECNEC Chairperson Dr. Mohammad Yunus in the chair. Among the approved projects, 14 are new, 5 are revised, and 3 involve extensions of a project tenure. The Housing and Public Works Ministry received approval for the revised project to construct 672 residential flats in 8 15-story buildings for government officers and employees at Aliganj and Naranganj. 5 projects were approved under the Local Government, Rural Development and Cooperatives Ministry. Stating that Bangladesh is going through a transitional process, BNP Secretary General Mirza Fakhrul Islam Alamgir said it is apparent at present that certain individuals and quarters have undertaken a dangerous conspiracy to obstruct this transitional process. Mirza Fakhrul made these remarks today while addressing a press briefing at the BNP chairperson's political office in Gulshan. Earlier, BNP held a meeting with leaders of Jamiat Ulema Islam Bangladesh. He also announced that 4 seats would be allotted to Jamiat Ulema Islam and declared their candidates for these constituencies. Besides, Mr. Fakhrul added that even though the country has emerged from a horrific fascist rule, some individuals and quarters are still engaged in sinister conspiracies to obstruct this process. He further remarked that the current government's failures have led to a deterioration of law and order. The International Crimes Tribunal 1 today ordered the commencement of trial by framing charges against ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and 16 others, including 10 army officers, in a case for crimes against humanity involving enforced disappearance and torture at the Task Force for Interrogation Cell during the Awami League regime. Chief Prosecutor Muhammad Tajul Islam, on behalf of the prosecution, prayed for the framing of charges, bringing 4 allegations against the accused. On the other hand, defense lawyers filed separate petitions seeking discharge of the accused from the case. After hearing the arguments from both the sides, the 3-member tribunal led by Justice Muhammad Ghulam Murtuza Majumdar rejected the discharge petitions and passed the order. The tribunal has fixed January 21 for placing the opening statement and recording the witness testimonies. Among the 17 accused in the case, 10 army officers have been arrested. Chief Election Commissioner AMM Nasiruddin today said the Election Commission wants to wipe out the stigma left by 3 disputed past elections by delivering a credible poll and demonstrating the rule of law in practice. Speaking in the morning at a coordination meeting with district commissioners, superintendent of police and field administrators ahead of the 30th national parliamentary election, Nasiruddin also said the commission was determined to prove that the law applies equally to all. There is no scope for failure in holding free, fair elections, he added. Addressing DCs and SPs, he instructed the field administration to enforce the law without fear or favor. No offender should be spared, he said, adding that a good election was the only way to shed the label of bad ones. The meeting, chaired by the Election Commission Secretary, was attended by the 4 other election commissioners as special guests. Senior officials including the Cabinet Secretary, the Chief Advisor's Principal Secretary, the Senior Secretaries of the Home Affairs and Public Administration Ministries and the Inspector General of Police were also present at the briefing. Police in Khulna have arrested a young woman known as Tanima in connection with the shooting of Motalib Shigda, a regional National Citizen Party affiliated Labour wing leader. She was detained late on Monday during a raid in the Tutpara area on the Shadur police station, said the officer in charge of Khulna Metropolitan Police Detective Branch. Police say the shooting took place around 11 am on Monday inside a flat rented by Tanima. The victim was hit near the ear with the bullet passing through. Doctors at Khulna Medical College Hospital later described his condition as stable. Investigators recovered yaba, empty liquor bottles and a spent bullet casing from the flat after the incident. Bangladesh today summoned India's High Commissioner in Dhaka to protest what it described as violent incidents targeting its diplomatic facilities in India, including vandalism at visa centers and protests outside its mission in New Delhi. Ministry of Foreign Affairs said it summoned Indian High Commissioner Pranoy Verma to convey Dhaka's grave concern over what it called regrettable incidents outside the Bangladesh High Commission and the ambassador's residence in New Delhi on December 20, as well as vandalism at the Bangladesh Visa Center in Shiliguri on December 22 by extremist elements. The ministry condemned what it described as the premeditated acts of violence and intimidation against diplomatic establishments. It said such acts not only endanger the safety of diplomatic personnel but also undermine the principles of mutual respect and values of peace and tolerance. Calling for a proper investigation, the ministry said Bangladesh expects a Government of India to immediately take appropriate steps in accordance with its international and diplomatic obligations to safeguard the dignity and security of diplomatic personnel and establishments. Viewers, we're taking a short break. Stay with us.
সারা দেশে লাখো মানুষের কঠোর কর্মতৎপরতা ও নিষ্ঠায় এসএ পরিবহন পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস এখন 16 কোটি মানুষের হাতের নাগালে। দীর্ঘ 30 বছর ধরে বিশ্বস্ততা ও দ্রুততার সাথে সেবা দেওয়ায় গ্রাহক সেবায় এখন শীর্ষে। বাংলাদেশে গ্রাহক সেবার সাফল্যের পর এসএ পরিবহন পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস এখন বিশ্ব বাণিজ্য কেন্দ্র সিঙ্গাপুরে। আপনার যে কোনো পণ্য সিঙ্গাপুর থেকে বাংলাদেশে বুকিং এর জন্য যোগাযোগ করুন। এসএ পরিবহন প্রাইভেট লিমিটেড, লজিস্টিক্স, পার্সেল অ্যান্ড কুরিয়ার সার্ভিস 22।
Welcome back. You are watching SATV News. Now, news from abroad. United States President Donald Trump has stepped up his campaign to take Greenland, declaring the Danish territory essential to Washington's national security and appointing a special envoy to lead the charge. Trump's remarks on Monday came as the leaders of Denmark and Greenland protested against remarks by the new envoy, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry, who said he would make the Arctic territory a part of the U.S. Speaking to journalists at his Mar-a-Lago club in Florida, the U.S. president reiterated his position that Greenland is vital to U.S. defense interests. U.S. needs Greenland for national security, not for minerals, the U.S. president said. The remarks followed Trump's Sunday announcement of a landrace appointment, in which he praised the governor for understanding how essential Greenland is to our national security. Landrace's statement drew a sharp rebuke from Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen and Greenland's Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen, who issued a joint statement asserting that Greenland belongs to Greenlanders. China on Tuesday urged the United States to fulfill its nuclear disarmament responsibilities after a draft Pentagon reports said China is likely to have loaded more than 100 intercontinental ballistic missiles and has no desire for arms control talks. The U.S. should create conditions for other nuclear weapon states to disarm, Lin Jian, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson, said during a regular press conference. China does not engage in nuclear arms races with any country, Lin added. Last month, U.S. President Donald Trump said that he may be working on a plan to denuclearize with China and Russia, but the draft Pentagon report said Beijing did not appear to be interested. The manager of Al-Razi Hospital in Aleppo said on Monday the facility received 10 casualties, including 2 fatalities, following clashes between Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces and Syrian government forces in the city. In the last few hours, 10 casualties were received, 2 of whom arrived deceased and 8 with varying injuries. 7 of the injured were in mild to moderate condition and were admitted to the hospital. One of the injured was in critical condition and was admitted to the intensive care unit. All the injured were civilians, 2 were members of the civil defense and the rest were women and children. Both deceased and the critical case were due to direct targeting of the street in front of Al-Razi Hospital, according to doctors. Wounded people arrived at Al-Razi Hospital in Aleppo following clashes on Monday between Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces and Syrian government forces in the city.
توجهنا مكان القصف، شفنا بنتين صغار مصوبين، نزلنا انا وزملائي مشان نسعى.
The Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces in Syria appear to have no intention of honoring a commitment to integrate into the state's armed forces by a year-end deadline, said Turkey's foreign minister on Monday. Last week, Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan said Turkey hoped to avoid resorting to military action against the SDF, but that its patience was running out. The visit to Syria's capital by the Turkish officials, who included Turkey's defense minister and intelligence chief, came amid efforts by Syrian SDF and US officials to show some progress with the deal. Turkey has accused the SDF of stalling ahead of a year-end deadline and Israel of resorting to destabilizing policies in Syria and of causing security risks in the country's south. There was no immediate comment on Fidan's remarks from the SDF or Israel. The U.S. military said it killed 1 person in a strike on a low-profile vessel suspected of carrying drugs in international waters in the Eastern Pacific Ocean on Monday. U.S. Southern Command released footage showing strikes on a vessel in the Eastern Pacific. It is part of an operation targeting narcotics trafficking routes. Joint Task Force Southern Spear conducted a lethal kinetic strike on a low-profile vessel operated by designated terrorist organizations in international waters, the U.S. Southern Command said on social media website X. No U.S. military forces were harmed, it added. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro announced on Monday that Congress have approved legislation aimed at protecting the country's maritime trade in response to the U.S. confiscation of the oil tankers. While speaking during a trade show on Monday, Maduro said the law, titled "The Law to Guarantee Free Navigation and Trade Against Piracy in the Seas of the World," passed its first discussion in Parliament and would likely become a law within days. Maduro described it as a law of great power. The legislation, which includes the penalties of up to 20 years in prison for those who support acts Caracas considers piracy, comes in direct response to U.S. actions against sanctioned Venezuelan oil vessels. A Mexican Navy plane transporting a medical patient and 7 others has crashed off the southern coast of the United States, killing at least 5 people. In a statement on Monday, Mexico's Navy said that 4 of the people on board were Navy officers and 4 were civilians, including a child. 2 people survived the crash, while 1 person remains missing, it added. The plane had an accident during its approach to Galveston. According to flight radar, the plane took off from Merida in Mexico's Yucatan state and was last recorded over Galveston Bay along the coast of Texas near Scholes International Airport. The cause of the crash is currently under investigation. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Monday that Ukraine and the United States are making progress on a package of bilateral security guarantees and an economic recovery plan following talks in Miami. Zelensky added that the framework included 20 points and a separate document with Washington that he expects to be considered by the U.S. Congress. He said about 90% of the annexes critical for Ukraine's military needs were agreed and described that draft as quite decent. Zelensky at the same time said a first version of a treaty on rebuilding Ukraine had also been prepared and criticized Russia for rejecting proposals for a Christmas truce, adding that Moscow's stance was a bad signal.
Ви сказали, що очікується, можливо, також атака на зимові свята.
Protesters in Tirana hurled firebombs at the government building housing Prime Minister Edi Rama's office on Monday, demanding the government's resignation after prosecutors indicated the Deputy Prime Minister for alleged corruption. Police arrested 4 people and opened investigation into 7 others following Monday's opposition rally, where Molotov cocktails were thrown at officers, injuring 3. Political tensions in Albania have escalated in recent weeks after the accusations were made against Deputy Prime Minister Belinda Baluku. Along with several officials and private companies, she has been accused of using state funds to favor some companies in major infrastructure projects. The Israeli government announced on Monday that the public army radio station known as Galatz or Galei Hall will close. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave the announcement during a cabinet meeting, saying that a military-owned radio station is a concept found in countries such as North Korea and maybe a few other countries we certainly don't want to be counted among. The announcement was met with criticism from Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid, calling the closure an overall attack on the media freedom of speech. Israel's defense minister said on last month that he planned to close publicly funded army radio in what he described as an attempt to preserve the military's non-partisan character, but the decision was denounced by the station's chief as a blow to press freedom. Romania's President Nicu Zordan pledged on Monday to investigate claims of systematic abuses in the judiciary after meeting judges and prosecutors, saying the integrity of the justice system was in serious doubt. Dan said hundreds of magistrates had described a climate of fear and undue influence by the Supreme Judicial Council, which they accused of acting in the interest of a select group rather than the public. The meeting followed Dan's open invitation to members of the judiciary to submit complaints after he said on Sunday he had received roughly 2,000 pages of examples of integrity problems warranting investigation and further action. Before ending, we go through the headlines again. ECNEC approves the 22 projects worth Taka 46,419 crore. Dr. Yunus chaired the meeting. Vicious conspiracy underway to obstruct a transitional process, says Mirza Fakhrul. BNP leaves the 4 seats open for Jamiat Ulama Islam. ICT orders trial of Hasina, 16 others for enforced disappearance torture at a TFI cell. You are updated with our top stories so far here on SATV, and to know the latest news, visit www.satv.tv. Stay with SATV.